All right, everybody, welcome to the regular town council meeting, town of Cave Creek, Arizona, Monday, October 4th, 2021. Evelyn, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Public announcements. I don't have an awful lot. Just warn people, be careful in the early morning and the later in the evening. The mosquitoes are out, and we have this darn West Nile virus now that's killing a few people around town. So not necessarily in Cave Creek, but in the North Valley. Use your bug spray. Call the public.
Scott Dane.
Scott Dane, Cave Creek resident, mayor, council members. This week's agenda contains an item entitled Pedestrian Traffic Safety Study Phase 2. I read the initial report when it came out, and now I've read this report. My comments center not around this agenda item specifically, but the fact that the town is even considering funding this item at this point in time. It looks like the town is touting a straight property tax to pay for a fire and emergency service department, which will cost between 2.3 and 2.8 million per year in ongoing annual expenditures, according to the town's own calculations. The town is also touting using our precious cash on hand. So far, the town is doing nothing to seriously look at alternative methods of payment to finance the new department. The town has officially ignored citizen input on the whole issue of alternative payment methods. What do they want to do? Tax some residents into poverty? Well, here's a perfect example of why the residents have no confidence in the town's ability to do a proper financial analysis when we're to look for funds for the fire department. The traffic safety study lays out 15 projects with a total cost of $2.3 million. These projects include all types of wasteful spending to further muck up our roads with unneeded traffic paraphernalia. It's not bad enough we look like an obstacle course with the poles sticking up in the streets in town core, most of which are broken and missing. Now you want to spend $2.3 million to put rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or RRFBs, and speed tables all over our town. Speed tables, which by the way, are hell on motorcycles, most of which you hate, but which bring a whole lot of sales tax revenue to this town. These projects are not going to slow anyone down that wants to speed through our town. They're just going to make us look like more of a carnival midway with flashing lights all down the main street. The town would do better to use $2.3 million to hire one additional deputy whose sole purpose in life is to sit outside the west end of town and give out tickets to the cars zooming in at 50 to 60 miles per hour. In addition, that officer could generate revenue for the town. Even if she or he did not generate any revenue from the tickets, 2.3 million would pay their salary for probably about 20 years. Or better yet, wait for it, the town could use that 2.3 million to pay for a year of the ongoing annual expenditures for the fire department. Oh, and by the way, I know what's your response. Well, Scott, most of these 15 projects can probably be paid for by grants and other funding sources. Well, that's fantastic. Now, how about putting the same effort into finding grants and other sources to pay for our fire department capital assets rather than a property tax? A tax which will be defeated at the polls, leaving you no option but to look into other ways to fund that fire department. You might as well start looking for those other funding options now. It's certainly a better use of your time than making us look like a carnival town.
David Phelps.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Phelps here, Town of Cave Creek resident. I have a simple request, I think, to help get the word out for the town residents. It's come to my attention that while I'm not on Facebook, that the town elected officials at times, as well as the town has a Facebook site, the elected officials at times utilize a private Facebook site within the town limits that kind of caters to the town limits And what I would like to propose is that instead of posting on that private site where you can be edited or the discussion can be cut off for various reasons, is that the town leadership that would want to communicate with your residents be allowed to use a town-sponsored site where it would be town discussion, and that would get more of the users that you're looking to talk to look at your speech. So I know Ernie's good at it. Tom will kick on to it, especially around election time. Salvo will get on there at election time. Morris, you're really good at posting after, kind of the results of this meeting. The problem is it's a private site. And if you're not a member, you can't contribute, or they can shut it off, or, other things can happen. Catherine, you've been on Facebook. I have seen at different times, Mr. Smith, even Paul Deep, I have seen at different times, different comments. I'd like to see what the discussion is, but because I'm not a participant, they don't show it. Where if you had the town site, you could allow the discussion to be seen by others. And I'm not 100% sure if Facebook is the way to do this or some other kind of blog, but I think the effort would be worthy to start the discussion. And I'm thinking specifically about things like this traffic study that you have for tonight, what it could do. We know how horrific the results turned out of the innocuous bike lane experiment that happened, where we took our award-winning medians and turned them into, well, the results are obvious out there now. There's a lot less there than was there. And I don't really think you can quantify any revenues from the bike lanes that, can constitute a rationale to do what to our town's core by ripping out the medians and putting in the bike lanes that we've gone through. We lost our identity with that project. That project was approved by multiple different councils, and everybody was surprised when the results were in, because the results tore out the native vegetation, put in, a wider landscape, and eliminated some of the medians. So communication is of the utmost now, because we are trying to do yet another business, and that is the fire business. So that's my comments. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dave. Bruce Arlen.
Good evening, Council. Bruce Arlen, Cave Creek resident. By the way, I agree with David's thoughtful Facebook communication platform idea. It's pretty smart on face value. And I agree with some of the things that Scott Dane just said. I just simply want to say, I've been waiting for the public discussion that has been promised, I believe here, private council member discussions I've had over telephones, where the public is invited in to discuss with you and the town alternative methods of financing a very needed fire department and emergency services department. When is that going to happen? We've been waiting week after week after week. I don't mean to criticize and be negative, but we're waiting. It's still not happening. And the clock is ticking, and I do feel the crunch of time. It will be the end of October shortly. It'll be Thanksgiving shortly. Then it will be Christmas time. And I know you guys are going to be voting on something. So please consider bringing us in soon. Different people who want to participate and who've already spoken out about this. Thank you very much.
Evelyn Johnson.
Evelyn Johnson, Director of the Cave Creek Museum. Oh, excuse me, Interim Director of the Cave Creek Museum. Just wanted to personally invite everyone. Our doors are open to the public. We had an awesome Smithsonian Magazine Museum Day with 117 in attendance in 4 hours. So it was a busy spot. And we had our first day on Friday and we had 26 people come. So just sharing, please come and see. We have some great new exhibits. I like to say that we've got a little bit of Van Gogh immersion going on in the history wing. So please come and view.
Thanks, Evelyn.
Town manager? You can't hear me if I got this off, can you?
Mayor, members of council and the public, we have our East Cave Creek Road phase of the microsurface road project underway. It will, they'll be working from Spurcross Road headed east to the town limits, which is roughly about Scopa Trail. The schedule began today, actually today and tomorrow, with removing the lines in the road and preparing the surface during the daytime. But the schedule for the actual road work is scheduled for the evening, for 8 p.m. through 5 a.m. And that will begin Monday, October 11th, and should be complete by Wednesday, October 13th, where they apply the slurry seal on the roadway throughout the town core. There will be temporary striping back in place by October 15th. And then there's some additional manhole valve adjustments, and then a final striping about the end of October or so. Effective October 1st, the town of Cave Creek assumes the permitting and inspection processes for sprinkler and fire alarms for all residential and commercial buildings. So any applications or permits that are already in existence are transferred to the town, and we've already begun that process. And I wanted to make, where did I put my note? Well, I don't know where I put it. I had another message, so I'll make it at the next meeting. And then lastly, for the public here that are looking for a public meeting on fire service and the revenues to cover the expense, there will be a public session in a work session setting with the council and the public. We're trying to schedule that for October. We have been in touch with a consultant. I know the town attorney has reached out to the bond council. So when we have all of that information put together and can coordinate schedules, there will be a session to discuss that. So you're all welcome. And we will notify those of you that we have names or phone numbers, emails, and we will put that out and invite your neighbors and anyone that you know that is interested or concerned about fire service and the costs and the revenues to pay for them. We welcome you all. So we will get that out as soon as we have a specific date.
I think there was one more public comment.
Was there one more public comment?
Mike Jackson?
He's right here.
It was, did you want to do it during the actual presentation or public comment? I think, yeah, public comment. Is it too late?
Raymond Mike Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the council for inviting me and not forgetting me. I'm a Cave Creek resident since 97. My wife and I have been here quite a while. I'm a staunch member of many Cave Creek coffee curmudgeon shops. We often have a lot of discussions in the mornings, anything from junior high school bathroom humor to nuclear physics. And I seriously mean that. But they have asked me, since they heard of this coming up, said, Mike, because you are a staunch critique of our traffic situation, which my thunder was somewhat stolen right off the giddy up. I just want to run into, and I'll make it quick here as far as I'm concerned. You guys have talked about most of it. You've got basically punji sticks in the middle of the road. For those of you who grew up in the Vietnam era, and somebody once wisely told me, if you put something or leave something in the middle of the road, it will get run over. And it has people that's gotten run over. It's gone from nice white to very dark brown. You know, and I've never seen the reason for it, but there's been no maintenance other than pulling them back up when they've been run over on occasion. Accesses to businesses are impeded. Mark from the Roadhouse up there, when he has his big to-dos, big trucks coming out of that big parking lot, making a right turn, just knock down that first pole every time. And it has caused other vehicular damage. A good friend of mine, classic motorcycle, got pretty damaged. He ran into it, and it's easy to do. You think you're going to make a pass in the lane, and all of a sudden you've got another stick in front of you. Sun angles. You guys know what it's like in the morning at dark 30, sun peeking overhead. You cannot see anything for quite a while. And then on the other end of the day, it gets dark, obviously gray, and those signs are not well looked at either. Those particular punji sticks are also associated with metal signs on the side of the road. Those things are really small and hard to read. At one point, I wasn't sure what I was reading. Is that a stop sign? Is that a yield sign? Or is that a nuclear hazard sign with the appropriate writing? And I know a lot of people from not Cave Creek will actually stop there. And I know you all seen it and heard about it before, thinking, hey, Marge, what's that sign say? Okay, having bitched about that, no, excuse me, I shouldn't have said that language. I will say that I've tried to be positive about this, and I actually got on what I consider a very, very interesting site. It's a National Highway Traffic Safety Admin site built up by DOT. And I found some very interesting statistics there, and I'll give you three very quickly. The state of Arizona is one of the worst in the nation. In terms of pedestrian deaths, both in terms of numbers and percentages. And the city of Phoenix is right there with them. And yeah, why not? We're the fifth largest metroplex in the nation. What did amaze me, though, is the city that had the absolute all the way across percentage-wise and actual fatalities for pedestrians is right here in this state. Anybody want to guess which town that would be? Nope. Mesa, Arizona. Mesa by far has the lowest percentage of any of that, according to this 2019 federal standard. I would maybe invite the mayor and the town engineers to go on a road show. You know, get up, pack up, and go down and talk to Mesa and say, what are you guys doing so well? You know, who knows? We could all learn something very possibly. I understand it was already brought up that there have been various studies, Maricopa Association of Government studies on what we do out here and so forth. I haven't seen any of those. I'm not a big social media guy, but
could you wrap it up, sir? We're way beyond the time
okay,
limit.
yeah, I'm almost done here. And I've pretty much said it all, but I will say one thing, and you probably won't like to hear this. Speed kills. We all know that. You know, you got 7 of those crosswalks out there from all the way up to the north down south here, 7 of them. You know, if you put a minimum speed sign during certain hours, I know we don't need circus lights, et cetera, you slow that speed down by 5 miles an hour. For those of you who understand physics, E equals mc squared. No, it's actually 1/2 mv squared. You lower that speed, say from 30 down to 25 miles an hour, you have lost half your energy in that vehicle. That I feel would be a lifesaver in itself, something to consider. Okay, that's all I
Thank you,
have. Thank you
Mike.
very much.
Thank you. Now. Oh, we're down to me for action items, right? Wow. All right, consent agenda, approval of September 20th, 2021 regular town council meeting minutes. We have a motion.
I have a change.
Oh.
Minor changes on page 865. Line 168. Change give to given. And also the same line, change with to consider.
You get those?
Considering or.
Considering.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right, now that we're back, now we have a motion.
Move to approve
Yeah.
with those changes.
Yeah. Second,
Second.
yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes, we have it. General allergy season. General agenda item number 1, which is presentation to council, the pedestrian traffic safety study, phase 2. Y'all going to address all these? I think that's why we hired you, was to tell us what to do about the traffic and the dangers.
Yes, since Mayor and Council, I'd like to present Shannon Ness and Sarah Montgomery from Kimley Horn. They were the consultants hired by the Maricopa Association of Governments to perform the study for us. Again, for those who were looking at what the cost of these studies were, they were borne entirely by the Maricopa Association of Governments. Other than for their consulting to come here to present to us, we have not spent any money on these studies, but we are looking forward to hearing what they have to say, the presentation, and we have budgeted $100,000 this year in the current budget for implementation of items, not 2-point-something million. We have first phase that we'd like to present and give them the opportunity to present to you the phase 2 study that was built off the phase 1 study, but it was to identify projects that could be quantified and basically phased in over a period of time, and get rid of maybe be able to get rid of the I guess we refer to them as punji sticks now. So that those are going away this week, by the way. They have to be obliterated as part of the surface seal, and they will, depending on how we phase in the next phase, they may or may not need to come back. But as the gentleman said, speed kills. We have the speed limit posted at 30. Our average speed through town is 38 miles per hour. Not the maximum speed, our average speed is 38 miles per hour. We get those off those traffic signs that we have that flash the speed at people that they tend to ignore. So I will let them present. Sarah, if you'd like to lead off. And then we also have Lena Barrett, who presented the first phase study to you. She was out on maternity leave, but she will be joining us remotely via Zoom.
Thank you, council members. My name is Shannon Ness. I took the lead on this second phase of the study when Lena was out on maternity leave. She is on the phone, I think, so she may chime in here or there, but I'm going to do the majority of the presenting to you guys, and then
Could
we
you
will
get
have-
a little closer to that microphone?
Yeah. Is that
Or
bad?
use your outside voice.
I'm like hugging it. Okay. All right. So like I said, my name is Shannon Ness. I'm from Kimley Horn. I'll be the one mostly presenting to you all tonight. Lena's on the phone, and then I have Sarah here as well to help with answering questions. Do you want to flip for me? So just a quick agenda. We're going to give a quick overview of phase 1, which is what Lena presented to you guys back in May of this year. And then we'll talk more in detail about phase 2. That's kind of the bulk of the presentation. Is there somewhere I'm supposed to point?
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, so you can keep going, but generally we're going to go over phase one quickly, and then I'm going to talk more in detail about phase two. There were several elements to phase two, including a warrant study for different crossing locations that were not included in phase one. And then the bulk of our effort was actually defining the projects and doing a benefit cost evaluation. So that's what I'm going to present to you guys about. Next slide. Keep going. So the phase one study, the goal of that was to really look at existing conditions and the crash history, the volumes, the different statistics about what's going on today and what's out there, and the different types of crash patterns and things that are causing problems, safety issues for pedestrians, bicycles, and pedestrians. And the study limits were from Cave Creek Road, Surrey Drive to Vermeersch. We completed that study in April of this year, and then we presented that in May. Next slide. This is just kind of a vicinity map showing those locations. There were seven different crosswalks that we looked at as the focus of that study. Again, Surrey to Vermeersch, so kind of really covering that town core area. Next slide. Our observations from phase one really boil down to it's very difficult to be a pedestrian or a bicyclist or an equestrian in this area. You're not very visible to vehicles. Vehicles are traveling very quickly. There's a lot of non-compliant signage. Really, it's just really difficult to cross the road, quite frankly. Current treatments out there today, there are some high visibility crosswalks, so that's good. There's that gateway treatment that got alluded to in some of the comments. So those are those white posts and the signs that are kind of difficult to read. And you're not wrong that they're difficult to see and they do get hit quite a bit. The treatments are also a little bit inconsistent through the town. So there's some combination of things that flash, things that don't. And it can be confusing if you're not from the area. There's also LEDs that are embedded in the roadway. So that's only at a couple locations. So again, a little bit inconsistent. Next slide. The different data that we looked at as part of the first phase, that included speed data, volumes, and crash history. So we looked at 5 years of crash data. There was one fatality that involved a bike or pedestrian, 4 serious injuries, and 13 total that involved a bike or a pedestrian. As far as volumes go, kind of the highlight that came out of that is the peak period is the evenings, the evenings and the weekends for pedestrian activity, and then the vehicles more so in the afternoons on weekdays. Speed, we did observe speeding in the field. Hal mentioned some speeding statistics that you guys get from your actual signs in town, and then we got speed data as well that confirmed that vehicles are traveling above the posted speed limit. Next slide. So just the outcome of phase one, kind of to recap, we defined them as short and long-term improvements then. Those have since changed a little bit, so you'll see something a little bit different on later slides. But more or less, the recommendations had to do with making pedestrians more visible. So different ways that we wanted to do that were looking at providing a more consistent type of treatment. So those rectangular rapid flashing beacons, I've got an example of what those look like. But those are something that have been statistically proven to help reduce crashes and make things safer. Looking at speed tables, that's something that we discussed at the previous council presentation in a lot of detail. Adding a couple of mid-block crossings at locations that we did get counts and have seen a lot more pedestrian activity that should be considered. We also looked at kind of some higher level things like reducing the lane widths, dropping a lane in each direction, potentially street lighting and pedestrian path level lighting, things that are not so bright that they're going to be overwhelming or, be counteractive to the dark sky requirements, but at least provide some lighting along the roadway to kind of keep people out of the street. So those were just kind of high level what some of the recommendations were that came out of that first phase. And then moving into phase two, so the next couple of slides, one more. So the goal of this study was to look at all of those recommendations and siphon them down a little bit more into actual implementable projects. So what is it going to cost to actually construct this improvement? How would we group them together? Those kinds of things. And we did a benefit cost analysis as part of that to make sure that the recommendations that we're proposing actually are going to have benefit for the town. So that comes later in our presentation as well. And we did that study in June of this year. So the first piece of that study was a warrant study. What that means is we looked at 2 additional crossing locations that were not part of phase 1. And those 2 locations were Surrey Drive, just to the south of here, and then Hohokum Place, which is really just right here in front of town council. And what we looked at is 2 different types of warrants, one being a pedestrian crosswalk warrant. So that's just a crosswalk with striping, no actual signal mast arm that goes out over the road. And the second type would be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, which is more of a signalized condition. That's those ones that have like the 3 lights and they flash and vehicles actually have to stop for those. It's a true signal type of control. So those are the 2 warrants that we looked at. If we go to the next slide, these are just some of the data that goes into those 2 warrants. I'm not going to, dig into how you actually do them, but more or less they look at pedestrian volumes, gap times. So like, can somebody actually cross the road? Are there enough gaps in the vehicle traffic? A spacing of signals, just different things like that. All these different data points go into this evaluation. Next slide. So the results, basically the way this works is you go through all that data, you assign a certain number of points per piece of criteria, and then you total all those points up at the end. And there's a certain number of points you have to meet the warrant. And at both locations for the warrants that we ran, neither one actually met the warrant. But I wanted to point out that at Surrey, our recommendation is still to plan for a pedestrian hybrid beacon. And the reason is we know that there's improvements coming on Surrey Trail to improve that trail and that crossing there at Cave Creek Road. Additionally, there's a residential development that's coming in that's going to be 48 units. We think that's probably going to generate more pedestrian, potentially bike, equestrian traffic there. So there's a lot of development that's coming, and we were really only 2 points below the threshold. So if you add just a couple more pedestrians per hour, you're meeting that threshold. So our recommendation for this location, if you go to the next slide, was—
Can I ask you a question before you go on?
Of course.
Clarity. Go over what a warrant study is.
Yeah,
and how it
sorry.
relates to percentage reduction in risk. or
Sure.
something.
Sure. So there's different types of warrant studies in traffic engineering. You could do a signal warrant, a stop control warrant. In this case, we did pedestrian type warrants. So we looked at a crosswalk warrant, which is just, should we stripe a crosswalk here? Just a crosswalk by itself. You could put the RFB, it doesn't matter, just crosswalk. And then the second warrant is the hybrid beacon, which is that signal mast arm. And I've got an example coming up, but basically it's a numerical based evaluation based on a whole lot of data, different guidance documents that we use on a national basis to determine whether or not, like numerically, if that thing is warranted. I don't know if I did a good job explaining that. Did that make more sense?
I think so.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, no.
Okay. And I can explain more as we go. It may make more sense as I go.
It's a criteria-based decision. But
Yeah, exactly. There, and this is ADOT methodology that we use. So it's used across the state. And it's really based on like national standards. But so that's the Surrey location. We don't recommend just an unsignalized crosswalk as a interim treatment. The reason for that is there are vehicles speeding, and we're worried that a unsignalized crosswalk could actually have an adverse safety impact because it might give people a false sense of security. You see the striping on the road and you think, oh, vehicles are going to see me, but they really don't. It's not making you any more visible than you are today. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that justification, or that recommendation. So recommendation is to plan for a pedestrian hybrid beacon at Surrey and include that in the CIP, but not to put in an unmarked crosswalk in the interim. And then for the other location, that one did not meet the warrant. There frankly just were not a lot of pedestrians out there when we counted. It's a little weird because we've heard feedback that there's a lot of activity. We saw some tonight, people crossing back and forth to Oregano's, but the volumes just were not there in our evaluation. So our recommendation was not to do anything there either. Same thing, we don't want to risk a false sense of security. So that's that one. So keep going for me. So now we're into the actual projects. So this is a long list. I'm going to go through each project individually and just give a high level explanation of what they are. but more or less they're grouped into short-term and long-term based on how intense the improvements are. So the longer-term projects have more median type improvements associated with them. They're more expensive and just there's a lot more to do with those projects. The stuff that's listed as short-term is a little bit easier to bite off in the near term. So next slide for me. So this slide just shows examples of what these different improvements look like. So on the top left, we have an example of those rectangular rapid flashing beacons. I'm going to keep referring to them as RRFBs. These are not a true signal type of control. These are just a warning sign that has a strobe underneath that alternates and flashes. They are proven to reduce crashes and improve pedestrian safety. So again, just a warning type of device is what these ones are on the top left. They are pedestrian activated, so a person actually has to push the button for them to start going off. Below that, I have an example of the pedestrian hybrid beacon. So this is an actual signal control device. Vehicles do have to stop for these when they're red. They alternate red and yellow depending on what part of the cycle you're in. But again, these are also pedestrian activated, so somebody has to hit that button. And they're on like a true signal mast arm as well that extends over the road. In the top right, we have an example of the speed tables. It's not the greatest example, but it gets the point across. Basically, there's a 10 or 15 foot period where vehicles will very, very gradually slope up. They'll be flat for another 10 or 15 feet for the crosswalk, and then they'll slope back down. So it's a pretty extensive, pretty gradual thing, but it does slow cars down, and that's proven. It elevates people as well, so a little higher, I guess, a little bit more visible maybe. But that's what a speed table more or less looks like. And then in the bottom right is an example of a bike lane that's been painted green. They have these all over Phoenix. They're becoming very popular, but the idea is basically to make the bike lanes more visible, make vehicles aware that there's a bike lane there. Next slide. Okay, so these next like 10 slides are the different projects. So I'm just going to quickly try and explain what each project is without getting too into the weeds. Project 1 is the bike lane alternative. So in this scenario, we would basically just point or paint the portion right under the bike stencil green. So it's like a 20-foot section that you'd paint green. It's hard to see, but there's an example at the top of the page. And these would be placed just strategically where you have the bike symbols today. It's something that could be done with ongoing maintenance. It's really not like that crazy. The next slide, this is an example of a different way that you could go about it. It's a lot less common. I really don't know that it's even done here in Arizona yet, but it's a way of extending that contrasting pavement color. You basically use this slurry material, which is like watered down asphalt kind of, to make the bike lane a different color. And this is less expensive to maintain, less expensive to put down. So that's why we recommended this as an option. It still provides that contrasting color, but more manageably. Next slide. This project is MUTCD sign upgrades. So the MUTCD is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It's a national standard for what signs are supposed to look like, how big they're supposed to be, how reflective they're supposed to be. There's a lot of signs in town that are not meeting this standard today for various reasons, height, mounting location, whatever. But this project would come through and replace everything that's not meeting those standards today. The next project. This is speed feedback signs. You guys have a few of these today. This one specifically would go near Surrey Drive, where we were talking about putting that hybrid beacon where that trail is. So the logic there is we know people are crossing there, that there's a dedicated trail there. Try and get people to slow down before you get into town. That's the idea. Next one. This is that hybrid beacon that I mentioned earlier. This is just kind of a mock-up of what that would look like there at Surrey. Not a whole lot to add here. So if we go to the next slide. So project 7 and the next several, these all have RRFBs. What I want to point out is 3 locations have a speed table and the rest do not. Those speed tables were strategically placed at Hidden Valley, Hilltop, and then in the Bar District. The reason for that is it sort of evenly spaces them throughout town. It hits, as you're coming into town, it kind of hits you and gets you to slow down. Yeah, so those are the three locations that we recommend the speed tables. The rest, we're recommending just a universal treatment of the RRFB so that as you're going through town, it's that same treatment everywhere. It's consistent. You know what to expect as you come up to a crosswalk. It's always going to look the same. So this is the Hidden Valley location. If we go to the next slide, this is American Legion. So this would actually be a new crossing. We got counts here as part of our phase 1 project. There's a lot of people crossing. It makes sense. I think there's a lot of activity at that American Legion. So this would be just putting in a new crosswalk, basically cutting through that existing median to do that and adding the RRFB signs. The next project, this is Hilltop. So this is right in front of the Kiwanis Marketplace. This would be another location we're doing that speed table along with those RRFBs. The next location, this is the Bar District at Hideaway. So this is an existing crossing, and this would be just adding those RFBs there. The next one, this is at Viola. So this is getting into the Bar District on that curve. When we did our phase 1 counts, we actually accidentally caught a lot of people crossing at this location. And because it's on a curve, it's a difficult spot to see. So the idea behind this crossing here is it sort of centers them on that curve so that you can see them the best you possibly can from both directions with as much advance notice. So this would be putting in a new crosswalk there and adding those RFBs with it. Next one is the Bar District at Roadhouse. So this would be the third and final speed table with those RFBs. And then the next two projects, these are
May I
more.
ask a question? Yeah.
Of course.
Why would you, I mean, there's a lot of traffic crossing there at Harold on the previous slide.
Mhm.
It looks like that's right at the roadhouse. Well, maybe that's okay. Never mind. That's the existing crosswalk.
It is, yeah.
okay,
Sorry if I
okay, I'm
didn't
sorry.
clarify that, but all of these, unless I said it's a new crossing, these are existing crossings. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that. Okay, so next project. So this is going back to Hilltop. So what we observed when we were in the field is there's a lot of people making these weird U-turn movements that are kind of blocking traffic. Basically what we did here is we reconfigured the median to provide dedicated left turn lanes. So you're still providing access to all these businesses. You're not restricting anybody's access, but you're doing it in a way that's actually providing them with a space to make those turning movements without the risk of them getting rear-ended. In this scenario, we're assuming that that speed table is already there and those RFBs are already there. So this would just be additional on top of that already in place improvement. For the final project, this is project 14. There's two slides here that go together. So this is the west end of that Bar District. This whole Bar District, one of the improvement recommendations we had was, and we actually talked about this last time in a lot of detail, but providing some kind of fence or handrail or something along with a path, not necessarily a sidewalk, but some kind of DG path or something that's going to channelize pedestrians and keep them in a dedicated space so that they're not just jaywalking, so that they're encouraged to go to those dedicated crossing locations, to use those dedicated parking areas. One of the things that we recommended along with this was potentially pedestrian level lighting. So again, nothing that's going to mess with the dark sky requirements, just low level path lighting that looks nice, frankly, and also encourages people to use those paths at night because again, nights and weekends are the times when we have the most pedestrian activity in this area. All the RRFBs and crosswalk improvements would have already been done in this scenario. And then if we go to the next slide, that's that speed table there again at Roadhouse. That's already there. But what we've done in this scenario, it's hard to see. So I'm just going to explain it. But basically, we've shifted that left turn into Roadhouse just down the road and provided them with an additional driveway. And what that does is it gets rid of the turning conflict from the left turn lane and that crosswalk. So today, that left turn lane goes right through the crosswalk, and that's a really big safety issue in our minds. So this eliminates that conflict and still gives everybody their place to make their turn, their access, whatever. It's all still maintained. So those are the 14 projects. We keep going. The next piece of it, we put together project estimates. So there's two pieces to these estimates. There's a design cost, which is, an engineer coming in and designing it, surveyor getting the topographic information and preparing plans that then go to a contractor. And those are where the construction costs come in. Those are the actual physical costs to build the improvement. So if we go to the next slide, I know it's super hard to see, but more or less the gist is the shorter term projects, they're a little bit more expensive, like I said before, a little bit easier to bite off and implement. The total project costs are the design and construction costs altogether. I'll get a little bit more into some of this later, so go ahead and keep going. Project schedules, I just want to touch on this briefly. Just as far as like expectations, what to expect, how long to implement these things. Design, depending on the improvement, can take 2 to 8 months, just depending what it is. The 8 months would be like those longer term projects, the things that have a lot of median work and some drainage and that kind of thing. The RFPs and stuff, those are definitely on the shorter end of that spectrum. And then construction schedule, just depending on how long it takes to procure, it could take a couple of months. So you're looking at potentially 6 months to a year, just depending on the project. But that fits in with the CIP plan. So next slide. Okay, so this is where the benefit cost evaluation is. So this is where we take all that stuff that I've word vomited at you and we bring it all together and we come up with a ratio that tells us, is this improvement worth doing? So if you go to the next slide, the different pieces that went into our benefit cost evaluation, we had crash information that we got as part of phase 1. So we know how many crashes are happening at every single location. We can get crash reduction factors from like a national source that tells us, based on all these studies that have been done at all these universities, how much does that improvement reduce the number of crashes? So we pull that information. We have the total project cost that we developed. Project life is just pulled from like another set of tables that ADOT and others have, that is just how long the improvement will last before you have to redo it. And then any annual maintenance costs. So we take all those pieces and put them together. If you go to the next slide, it spits out all these fun numbers. I know it's hard to see, but the gist is those RFPs combined with the speed tables, because you're looking at doing 2 improvements together, and because the crash reduction factors are so good for those are by far like our highest improvements. So those 3 are at the top of the list, those 3 locations, with Roadhouse being 1, Hilltop, and then Hidden Valley, followed by the sign upgrades and the American Legion crossing, which is that new crossing. And then some of the Hilltop, the longer term, that also had a good benefit cost ratio, but I'm kind of focused on short term. So you keep going. This is just taking that table from before, reorganizing it just ever so slightly based on a little bit of engineering judgment, but more or less we prioritize those 4 projects. So those 3 speed table locations and the new American Legion crossing as our top priorities that we think in the near term need to be the focus. Below that is pretty much all the other crossing locations, bringing those up to the same standard RFP so that the application is consistent through town. And then below that is the bike lanes and the MUTCD sign upgrades. And the reason is those are things that can be done on an ongoing basis as part of regular maintenance, or you can even lump some of that stuff into some of these other projects and capture some of that. So those 2 were low priority for us. So if we go to our next slide, the implementation plan. So Hal mentioned earlier that you guys set aside $100,000 for this next year. Just taking that same sort of assumption, we put together a 5-year plan for how you could implement these high priority projects. And over that 5 years, between the design and construction costs, you could get through those 3 speed table and RFP locations and still come in under that budget. So next slide. Some other options, somebody mentioned federal funding earlier. That is absolutely something we encourage the town to go for, because we've done a lot of legwork here. All the data is here to go after that funding. The way that we would go about this is we would actually recommend that the town combine some of these projects together and go after even more funding. So group 1, for example, would be all of those speed table locations combined with the MUTCD sign upgrades. So you'd get all your speed tables with those RFPs, plus all the signs upgraded to current standards. The second grouping would be, say the town wants to handle those 3 projects. That would be all the other RFPs would be part of that second grouping. A third option, if you want to just kind of shift gears and focus on Surrey, would be to do that pedestrian hybrid beacon at Surrey and the speed feedback signs that go along with that, because they're kind of one location. You can justify doing those things together. Beyond that, if the town wanted to look at phasing these in some kind of different way, the way that we would recommend grouping these improvements would be to do the 3 speed tables together and then those 3 RFBs together. So whether you do the RFBs first or the 3 speed tables, you're still hitting those 3 top priority locations, but potentially there's some contractor savings by doing those together, or just that consistency factor, right? Having those 3 speed tables in together gets, people just get used to it and then they're done. It's not like a new one popping up every year. So next slide. Next slide. Thanks. All right. So just to recap, the 3 top priority that we recommend to include in the CIP are those 3 speed table locations: Roadhouse, Hilltop, and Hidden Valley. We recommend that the town continue to monitor speeds and crashes because, even though you implement something, stuff could still happen. So we want to make sure we're watching that. Consider a future installation of that hybrid beacon at Surrey. Like I mentioned, it doesn't meet the warrant, but it's so close. And we think that that new development is going to push it over the edge. So something to keep an eye on and plan for as part of the CIP. And then continuing to monitor this crossing right here at Hohokam. Potentially the volumes we got were just COVID era volumes. And as things get back to normal, maybe it'll change and there will be a warrant met there. And then finally, consider applying for grant funding because like I said, we've done all the legwork. You guys definitely have the justification for it. But maybe consider grouping these projects based on that. So I think there's maybe one more slide. Yeah, next step. So put together a CIP, figure out how the town wants to go about, what order they would like to implement these projects in, and then explore grant funding opportunities. Those would really be the next steps. So questions, I'm sure there's some.
Tom, you got your hand up?
I do.
Okay.
Have you taken into account that this town is blessed with the fact that people coming in from the east have a downhill coming into Whiskey Central, and some way of slowing people down, maybe even up around the top of that hill? I'll say that a couple of weeks ago, my wife was driving. She's a better driver than I am. We came up to one of those, the crosswalk there at Harold's, and she slowed down. And so immediately someone walked in front of us, started into the other lane in which someone was passing us. And I don't know, how you can deal with that, but perhaps you do. But that's just an example of, something that's unique about this town, both Whiskey Central and the fact that coming in from the east, you've got that downhill stretch, and coming in from the west, you've got the curve. So I think those are rather unique situations. Have you taken those into account?
So I'll start on the west end because that's the easier answer. Yeah, we've taken that into consideration because our study limits included Surrey. So looking at that hybrid beacon, looking at those speed feedback signs, also placement of that speed table there, that very first one. Yeah, it's kind of right after the curve, but it is kind of right as you get into town. So that does encourage people to slow down. On the other side, honestly, that was slightly outside of our limits. We didn't look at that specifically, but I do think that that speed table in the bar district does sort of help serve that purpose, right? So we have those 3 that are kind of evenly spaced throughout the town, those speed tables. I think by having them kind of right as you get into town, that initially helps people slow down and then stay slowed down as they go through town.
I can see somebody coming down from the Irish pub and just launching at that speed table.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that it's downhill there. It is difficult to control speed. And I would suggest that, maybe you can find some way of just slowing people down at the top of the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. And I have one other question, right? But
Yeah, I mean, enforcement is certainly an option.
and I would say what we want is not enforcement, it is compliance.
Yeah.
And I can see Adam over there saying, please, because our citizens don't want enforcement. We want compliance.
Yeah.
And I know that's what you're working on. Have you considered having any kinds of signs or even markings on the road saying, that you're coming up upon a pedestrian area?
Yeah, something like that could certainly be helpful. Like I said, that was slightly outside of our limits, so it's hard to say without having really evaluated it. But certainly the like advanced warning signage. There's certainly things you can do with signage that may help with that problem. That area specifically might need a little bit more analysis or attention, but I think there's things that could be done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilman Morris,
Is there some place in the valley where we can see these speed tables that are designed for the specific speed limit we have in town, that we can drive over them? I'd like to drive over one, frankly.
Yeah. Is it Chandler? Yeah, the city.
Chandler.
So
that's
the
the closest one.
well, I'm sure there's others. The one that we grabbed a detail for that we included in our report happened to be the city of Chandler. I don't know. Can you think of any others, or Lena, if you're still there?
Hal, maybe you can see where the close one we can get that's designed for the speed that we're designing for. Because, we don't want something where that jars your teeth, hopefully, unless we have to. But I'd like to see just how disruptive those bumps are.
Our goal is smooth at 30, somewhat jarring at 35, and not comfortable at 40.
Yeah.
That would be our goal.
Yeah, so
And
finally we could drive over, if you would, please.
and the challenge for some will be to catch air.
Well, that's what's happening with our bungee sticks, as he refers to them. Right now, we will literally have the one installed or repaired. We'll go to the other end of town to repair one, and we'll come back and somebody will have taken the time for sport to run over it with their truck and mangle it up, the one we just installed. So yes, it's become sport.
I have one more follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why aren't there speed cameras on here as a speed control device?
I don't know if they work.
They don't work?
I don't know. I don't know. Actually, did we talk about them as part of phase one?
They weren't brought up as part of phase one. It's not a recommendation we considered because it goes back to police and enforcement, and then something out of that. It's more of a city role to take on versus something that if you put out a sign, there's not much maintenance associated with that. But then someone within the town, or you would hire someone, would have to then monitor, send that out, and do that. We could have looked into that. It just didn't necessarily.
Are speed cameras effective?
Yes, they do reduce it. Back to Chandler, sorry. I don't know necessarily how to close it, but they have a pilot program where they've installed red light cameras per se. I don't know about so speed. You have to set the tolerance of that, and then if people in town figured out what the tolerance was,
Which is about 10 miles an hour, which is about where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'm just thinking Paradise Valley, and I mean, I guess they always have those permanent cars parked there with the speed cameras, but I feel like people slow down because they're always in the same spots, right? They slow down there and then they just keep going.
You have a question?
Big brother.
Councilmember Royer.
I thought one of our issues was people crossing not at crosswalks.
Yes.
And if that was the case, then we were considering constructing decorative barriers.
Mhm.
I don't see that in this report.
Those are kind of buried in there, but they're in project 14 in the bar district. There's a handrail recommendation. So that is there to help kind of channelize them and keep them on the pedestrian paths. There's a couple of crosswalks that we recommended, like the American Legion and the Viola location, where we did see people jaywalking. So the idea is that providing a dedicated crossing location there, if it's not that far away, it would encourage people to actually use that crosswalk, especially when they've got the flashers and the improved visibility. There's also some of the improvements up at Kiwanis. I know that's another area where you kind of get a little bit of the jaywalking. I think the improvements by providing those RFBs there would also encourage people to use those. So to answer your question, the handrail is there in project 14 in the bar district. But some of these other improvements I think could also have that effect.
And maybe I missed it, but how is the flashing going to be initiated?
People push a button.
Okay.
Yeah. So somebody actually has to physically hit the button. It's not going to just randomly go off. Yeah.
Vice Mayor? Current Vice Mayor.
Current Vice Mayor, okay. Actually, I've got a couple of questions for Mr. Marin. Now, This study is specifically pedestrian related. I see not too far in the future that if the development on the northwest corner of Schoolhouse and Cave Creek gets developed and Galloway Heights starts being, people start living there and driving there, there's going to be really a much more significant problem, both pedestrian wise and traffic wise at the corner of Schoolhouse and Cave Creek. Now, I know that's not considered here because it's not existing yet as a major issue, but doing prognostication, I see that as an issue in the future. And certainly it needs to be incorporated one way or another in the town's plans relative to what will be done. Other question is, have you submitted anything to MAG to tap some of that extra unspent on whatever money it is, not too many millions of dollars, but $20 million a year or something like that? Have you submitted any requests for any of the projects, or do you plan to do so for any of these to maybe help out the town just a little bit financially?
The answer is we have not yet submitted because we wanted to see how, whether the council said, take it and go. But at the same time, there is money available. I have talked with MAG about funding for some of these projects, or at least taking some of the cost of these projects off of our plate and onto theirs. They funded these studies entirely on their dime.
That usually is a harbinger that they might be willing to spend some more money to resolve issues.
Correct.
There are 2 or 3 situations in town that are the glaring ones. The one I always see is the crosswalk at Haroldson and the
Roadhouse and the chip.
Yeah, that's obviously to me one of the biggest issues in town, because people come down over the hill, and I've seen that. I drive from Carefree coming into town, and all of a sudden I see people speeding up for no good reason. Maybe it's because the speed limit's 5 miles an hour slower than the 35 to get into Carefree a little further going north and south. But that's certainly an issue. And then I'm thinking that the one on Schoolhouse is going to be a significant issue probably within a couple of years.
Vice Mayor Smith, the issue at Schoolhouse and Cave Creek Road is already an issue. About 5 years ago, the town had a study done. And actually at that time, there was a recommendation where, and I'm going to say this with a cringe, they recommended that we put in a traffic signal at Cave Creek and Schoolhouse roads. And instead we put in we went to the larger sign with the flashing red lights and stop signs. But at that time, the recommendation that it met a full warrant for putting in a traffic signal at that location. So with traffic going up, we don't need to wait for traffic to get more. It's already met the warrant, and it did that 5 years ago.
Yeah, I noticed that I have to admit, I look at Facebook now and then, and there's the complaint section on Facebook that's for the town. And it has 17,000 people on it. Most of them are not from the town. But one of the things that is escalating lately is the concern of people coming over the top of the Library Hill and then going down past Galloway.
Yes.
Ridge. I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of things that you've already got planned there, but I think that they're going to become crucial in the short term.
Believe me, for going into Galloway Ridge, whenever I go out, and I go out probably 3 times a week to do an inspection there, I say a prayer as I'm making that left-hand turn to get into Galloway Ridge. Because it is blind coming over the top of that hill. So,
Thank
yes,
you.
I understand the issue.
Thank you.
Former Vice Mayor.
Mayor. One of my questions is, if the town did not do any of the improvements contained in your presentation, what would the rate of incident be moving forward? Because in your study, you point out in 5.5 years, between 14 and 2019, that there was one death, crashes, alcohol related, speeding, this, that, whatever. The town took no action. And there certainly would be an increase in population of the town based on the development. Would the percentages change at all? Or would it just pretty much be the same as it was for that period of time?
I don't know that there's a way for us to know for sure. I think it's fair to, if you have to make an assumption, assume it would probably be comparable or more, because volumes are probably going up and the population's going up. I really don't know that there's a good way to predict that. But I think what you can look at is the crash reduction factors that we looked at as part of our study. I don't know if you have any of those offhand, but I mean, they show, based on studies that have been done all across the country, there's a meaningful reduction, right, by doing something. So by not doing something, I think it's fair to assume that it's probably at least going to be similar or comparable. You could also have a couple of years theoretically that are lower or higher than normal, but that's why we take 5 years of data. We do that kind of as a standard. We always look at 5 years because then we can easily see, okay, that 1 year was kind of a fluke relative to the others. So I don't know, I think is the answer, but I think a fair assumption is that it would be similar to what we saw. So
The second question I'd have would be that no matter what you do, if you had blinking lights, if you had traffic signals, if you had speed bumps, if on and on and on, there's an old saying, you can't fix stupid. And, if you got, I forget what the percentages were and crashes were with alcohol related incidents, but no amount of improvement is going to stop that, in my opinion. And people's talking on their cell phone as they go down the hill and around the corner, you're not going to stop that, even though it's illegal. I think we should do something. And I think if we could get grants and federal funding for this, as you're suggesting, grouping it, I think would make sense to, see where we could take it. But again, you're not going to change human nature.
yeah,
I think you know that.
yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, you're right.
No,
You're
that's
not
fine.
going
You don't
to
have
fix
to
it.
answer. Thank you.
Anything else from council?
Well, just one final comment related to that comment. You might not be able to change human nature, but I think as governmental officials, elected officials, our responsibility is for the health and the safety of our community. And that's why we're doing this. And that's why we've invested in this. And that's why we need to move forward on this. If we get grants, that's a wonderful thing. But even if we don't, we need to protect our community, and we need to protect our visitors who are not familiar with our streets, crossing from one side to the other. We recruit them. We want them here. We want them to spend their money. We want them to enjoy Spur Cross. We need to protect them when they're here. It's our responsibility. That's why we're elected. It's our responsibility.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, comment on that. I agree with that, your comments, but I also worry about that by putting in multiple traffic safety items, that it'll tend to cause more problems and solve. I see that. I go through the town core 7 days a week because I live in the town core. And I know the comments for the vertical poles.
Right.
there
If
and
it's done
everything,
right,
but-
we could avoid that.
But people almost slow down and sometimes stop.
Because that sign is
Even without the signs.
is not
because
written
they're afraid
correctly.
their car won't fit between the pole and the edge of the pavement. And that, to me, tends to, it's a greater
risk for cars behind it plowing into it. So I think we've got to be very careful in what we look at, recommend, and consider, because it's like taking a prescription. Your doctor prescribes you might cure the ailment, but it causes 10 other things to go wrong.
Well, I totally agree, but obviously those
Well, then we
punchy
agree
poles
to
are
agree.
not,
Okay.
those poles are not recommended. We're not going to
Right.
redo that.
Right.
There is public comment on this one.
David Phelps.
So just to clear something up, David Phelps here. Are we talking about $2.3 million?
Closer to the microphone, Mr. Phelps.
Are we talking about $2.3 million? That's a number we heard earlier tonight in testimony during call to the public. What was added up to get there? I don't understand. Scott, maybe you could help me out. What
Well-
was it that you,
Depends on what we do.
oh, I see. Okay. All right, so we're basically, because we don't want to enforce the speed limit, we've got a $2.3 million speeding ticket. Because it's too hard for us to grapple with the idea that we have a contract with Maricopa County Sheriff's Department that went up a little bit recently, is my understanding. That we're going to retrain people into slowing down as they come flying down the hill and coming around the curve. I'm not so sure any of this is going to work. I wish I was sure. I'd love to recommend something here tonight, but I think the speed tables present a safety hazard for the motorcycle contingency that we seem to want to attract more and more of. I'm not a motorcyclist anymore, but I'm not so sure these are the answer for that. Maybe at certain speeds they work right. The 48 units that are not started to date, I would think that the new residents there, while they might have a need to walk from the west side of the road to the east side, that's probably 3 years down the road at minimum for those new residents in that subdivision that still needs approvals, that hasn't actually turned any dirt. And for the access into the one parking lot that is being promoted here on number 15, I am very much against the town spending 5 cents to make an access for a private business. We are constantly told about how people want free markets and they want to be free to do their business. And yet we want to go in and pay for a new access for them. And I'm totally against that. That's not right to me. So it would provide better traffic flow. Well, good. Let them pay for it. Show them the study. Let them come up with the $100,000 to do that access if they want to. The median destruction that's going to continue, where you're bifurcating the median down to little trash can size pieces, totally against it. Quit ravaging the beauty of the area and compromising for the residents what we live here for, and enforce the speed limit. It's real simple. I won't take any more of your time. I would note that on the exhibit showing the handrail, that it appeared to me that the handrail actually went across part of the entranceway to the Petite Acres, or actually across the driveway for the Circle K. And I'm curious to know, I won't ask a question, but I'm curious to know what happens to the people that get on the wrong side of the guardrail, because then you've got them trapped between the white line and the guardrail.
Frogger.
Frauder or flogger?
Frogger.
Frogger.
Remember the game
No,
where the frog had to cross the road?
because he needed it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And by the way, the federal dollars flowing to this kind of project, this is becoming a shovel-ready project. I think that's what I heard Hal saying. That scares me more than anything else. that's how we kind of got our medians desecrated and decimated with the last approval that we had for improving sight lines, improving bike lanes. Thank you.
And could we get that question answered?
For who?
I have a question of the engineer.
We'll
What he said.
go when we're done.
Okay.
Scott Dane.
Scott Dane. Allergies, like you said, Ernie. Scott Dane, Cape Creek resident. I wasn't going to speak, but sometimes it's just too easy. First of all, the colors on the presentation were incredible. They were bright, they were vibrant, and they fed right into exactly what I said, that we're turning this town into a carnival midway. So thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. This is a great study for Scottsdale. I think that they would just snap this right up and put these things in. We don't live in Scottsdale. We live in Cape Creek. Okay. I never want to live in Scottsdale. Still don't want to. A lot of people up here wouldn't go near there. Okay. This is turning this town into Scottsdale. If we can turn town into Scottsdale, let's just have them annex us. We can have their fire department, we can have their property taxes, everything else. Okay. Sorry, we're not Scottsdale. Don't treat us like we're Scottsdale. Speed is not a factor in these accidents, as we heard some comments up here, and we saw in the studies. It's alcohol, and as Councilman Zova said, you can't stop stupid. It's idiocy. Okay, perfect example. I'm coming down Schoolhouse to the stop sign today. Car pulls up, coming from the west. I'm sitting here. There's a car over here ready to go west. Okay, 1, 2, 3. He goes across. I get ready to go, and the guy over here zooms right across in front of me and turns in front of me. Okay. I'm sorry, I had the right of way in that case. Okay. How do you stop that? That's idiocy. That would have created an accident. If there'd been a bicycle or motorcycle, that would have been a fatality. Okay. You can't stop that with signs and flashing lights. You know, I heard comments back when phase 1 was brought up about a single lane in this town. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. This town every year when Bike Week comes along screams and yells about cutting us down to 1 lane. And the fact that anybody would even consider putting that into a report that we have a permanent single lane anywhere in this town. I guess my next question is going to be, if we have a single lane and cars are on both sides and there's trees in the medium, how's our new fire department going to get past to fight fires on the other end of town? I guess they're not. Let's see. Councilwoman Royer talked about health and safety and teaching people to cross the street. I was always taught that Darwin said survival of the fittest. If you can't cross a street, maybe you shouldn't be crossing the street, okay? You're not going to teach those people to do it. They're going to do it. If they get hit, oh, well, I guess the strong survive. How many heart attacks have we had in this town where people have died over the past 5 years? I'm sure there's been a couple of them. So we've had 1 traffic fatality. We're going to spend $2.3 million. I really think what we need is AEDs at every corner going into every neighborhood. In case somebody has a heart attack, we can save our residents first, not worry about the tourists coming into town. Likewise, I know we've had some shootings in the past. 2.3 million, that'll buy a lot of ballistic vests so everybody can be protected against getting shot in this town. I can't even get my road paved. You're talking about 2.3 million to go down the center of town.
Thanks, Scott. That's all?
No, one last question. Oh,
Well, we're not done with council.
oh. Could I ask a question? Are those mounds dangerous to motorcycles?
The speed tables?
Yes.
I don't see why they would be, frankly.
Mr. Dane.
Okay.
Do you have statistics on that?
I don't have statistics in front of me on that. What I can tell you is the sloping up is very gradual. Like I said before, it happens over a 10 or 15 foot period. So it is gradual. Sounds like you might have a.
I don't have statistics directly in front of me, but since we recommended them in the phase 1 report, we have looked into it based on the slope, because it is a 10 or 15 foot to slope up. 6 inches is the height that they're raised, and then 10 to 15 foot back. The slope is not dangerous to motorcycles as in statistics, national statistics that I don't have in front of me.
Perhaps you could forward those to us.
Yeah, and we did look at the crash reduction factors. That's the reason that those 3 projects out of all of them, I mean, they, what, 10 of the 14 had an RFB in them, and the 3 that had the speed table had by far the highest benefit cost ratio because they also add the speed table factor. So it is something that's been studied nationally. We don't have the statistics in front of us, but it's been studied.
Councilman McGuire, you had a,
No, I think that, but
was that it?
yeah, but I think I saw Councilman Morris, when he realized he was talking with an engineer, boy, did he brighten up.
So does that conclude the presentation and our questions? Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 2, which council discussion action to remove 1 member of the present planning commission for no cause effective immediately and direct staff to begin the process to fill the vacancy on the commission if removed.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I was contacted by some members of council and I was contacted by Mr. Alcama concerning the title of this agenda item. The inquiries as to why a name wasn't identified with this action item for 2 reasons. 1, the open meeting law only requires advance notice to a person if indeed they are the subject of an e-session item. And there was no e-session item, so there was no duty to notify. But secondly, it was a matter of courtesy. I have no idea how you as a council will decide to vote. And so rather than put the name in the agenda, and if indeed you elect not to remove, then we don't have to worry about publishing the name in a negative fashion. I explained that to Mr. Alcama and he understood, I believe. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Alcama has asked me if he has the opportunity to speak. You've agendized this for public comment, so it's up to you as to whether or not when you call that.
Yeah. Anything from,
Can we ask Mr. Sims any questions?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, I thought that you were going to act as, say, a prosecuting attorney or something. And give a,
This has nothing to do with prosecution. The commission
Was-
members serve at your will.
was there illegal action taken by Mr. Alcama?
This item grew out of an agenda item that occurred before this council on September 16th. This concerns a matter that is currently pending before this council. We have to be very careful about protecting the property rights of the applicant and neighbors. They have due process rights. And so for me to be describing whether or not his conduct was appropriate or inappropriate is not appropriate. Because frankly, I don't want to create a record that if indeed you as council decide to turn down the application, that I've indicated that his action was inappropriate. My view is he has taken positive steps and has recused himself at the commission. I believe that's appropriate. And I believe that's probably sufficient. Having said that, I don't want to go any further concerning what we discussed in each session and what you might say tonight, because we have a matter that's going to come before you that deals with property rights and for which the due process clause of the US Constitution and the state constitution requires notice and hearing, and we don't have a notice and hearing tonight on that matter. So the bottom line is, I'm not able to answer your question. I do say when we were advised of the facts, he understood and he recused at the commission level. That was appropriate, and I believe as town attorney, that is sufficient.
One more question. Is it appropriate to write to council members even prior to the planning commission meeting with a series of questions? Now, I didn't get this. This is, as they put it, hearsay, because I've never seen any evidence of anything. So it's a little hard for me to make a decision on something. But my question is it inappropriate for a commission member to be, from my point of view, lobbying the council members in advance of a commission meeting relative to what's going to be discussed at the commission?
Remember my earlier comment, Mr. Vice Mayor, about not wanting to create a record, but let me see if I can answer your question, because even Mr. Alcama agrees by the fact that he recused himself, that perhaps there may have been some inappropriate conduct. The way this is supposed to work is when there is a matter coming before a governing body, be it the commission or be you, is that you have to keep an open mind so that the applicant and the neighbors understand that you haven't made a determination without looking at all the facts. All the applicants have the right to make a presentation to you in an open meeting, and that's what occurred at the commission, and that's what will occur here. And so to the extent you commit yourself in one way or another, and the question is, was there a commitment? I believe he understood the issue, and this is a public document. The applicant in this matter requested a public records request, so has seen all the emails that you are here, you say you've heard about from the rumor. I believe that was corrected with his recusal. And so, but the fact that the communication occurred did create this issue that had to be addressed, and I believe he addressed it at the commission level.
Thank you.
All right, public comment.
Reg Monachino.
Reg Monachino, Cave Creek resident. The matter before me right now is not one of high crimes and misdemeanors. We have here an administrative bump. I know of no one who loves this town more than Commissioner Alcala. I don't believe there was malice in his actions. I don't believe he knew his actions were inappropriate. I'm positive it won't happen again. Thank you.
Paul Elkema.
Mayor Bunch, council members. I'm standing here tonight, embarrassed. And I want to acknowledge that I jumped an important step in the line of communication we use to get things done in this town. I think you all recognize that I don't view this appointment through eyes or an attitude that's cavalier. I take this seriously. I dig at it. I read the laws, I read our ordinances, and from there, I progress on the commission to make a recommendation with the commissioners, not by myself. I did it. I understand the effect of that mistake, and it won't happen again. In towns the size of Cave Creek, folks have real opportunities to contribute. That's one reason we moved here. This is the perfect size town for finding a voice, contributing, and being able to step away and say, it was a good thing to be here. I valued your trust. I've felt your respect, even in this situation. I have appreciated that. I hope I can regain that trust. I believe you're aware of the good energy I've brought with my appointment to the Planning Commission and to the establishment of some preservation efforts here in town. Cave Creek's a great place to live. So here's my promise to you. I will honor our communication protocols. I will continue to ask hard questions appropriately. I will work for positive results. I do want very much to continue as a planning commissioner. Questions? Then I thank you.
David Phelps.
Hello, council members. I don't know Mr. Ekema. I hope I didn't say your name wrong. I do stand here tonight and want to support his continuance on the planning commission, because I do think that we can all get caught up in the moment and we can make mistakes. So I would suggest you allow him to continue to serve. Thank you.
Okay, we're back to council.
I have a comment or two to make, if I
Go-
may.
Please.
Please stop me, Mr. Sims, if I overreach, but I know Mr. Alkema and I know his commitment to the town. I know that he has a real passion for our town and helping it and guiding it and making it better. But one has to realize, I think, that by bypassing certain steps or a step in which due process is not met and bias could be demonstrated, that it could have an effect on the town as a whole, perhaps litigation, dollars, etc. So it's something I'm not taking lightly, and it's something I've tried to look at both sides. And I will say sometimes once is one too many, although I do appreciate the comments of won't happen again. I look at it, should it have happened at all? But anyway, again, thank you for your passion and thank you for your commitment to the town. It does not go unnoticed, at least by me. So thank you.
Councilman McGuire.
I'm thinking of actions that have been taken by the town in the past. And I want to point out that there are a couple of factors that I did not see in former transgressions. One is the pronouncement, very important one, by Mr. Sims, that this individual, that Paul, has taken action in recognition of the importance of the behavior. And Mr. Alkema has come before us tonight in contrition, and I don't believe that I have seen that in similar situations.
So,
No, I have a comment.
oh,
I was one of the recipients of Mr. Alkema's ill-fated letter to council member, myself, and I think Mr. Morris was the other. And yes, it was very unfortunate. And it was a good thing that he recused himself from the Plan Commission. And I have thought about this long and hard on what's the most important and valuable step here to take on behalf of the town. And my conclusion is that the people that we entrust to serve in these capacities is more important than anything. And so Paul recused himself from the Plan Commission meeting where the decision was made. And I will then recuse myself from the discussions on Hidden Canyon. There are enough other council members who can listen to the discussions and make a decision on that development. But I think Mr. Alkema's presence on the Plan Commission is more important overall than my presence and my decision on Hidden Canyon. And so, Paul, that's a lot. That's a lot because, you know, this job is very important to me too. And the responsibilities of it are very important to me. But you are more important to the town in your capacity as a plan commissioner. And I hope you fulfill that role very seriously over the next year and a half because there's a lot more work to be done.
I'm gonna, Paul, were you waving at me? I mean, well, it was a very, very subtle way.
This is, one of the hard and weirder things we've had come to council. And I know that I've certainly made a few mistakes over the years. And I think the most important thing is when someone makes a mistake is if they learn from it. And it sounds like Paul has definitely learned from this. And I've thought about this a lot, and it's it's unfortunate, and it kind of had the potential to really blow up in our face, but I think it's not going to do that now. And I'd like to see him stay on.
Are you going to make a motion? Or you?
No, I'm going to have my say.
Okay. Okay, please.
My say is that while I feel that Paul Elkema did a couple of things that were absolutely and totally inappropriate. The most inappropriate being writing to council members, even if they were just questions. It was an act to lobby in one way or another. However, as Mr. Sims has not said, there was no illegality. He hasn't said there is any illegality. So I'll let it go at that. I know you, Paul, and I know you're concerned for the town and doing what's right for the town and making good decisions as part of a planning commission member. I will make a motion. Can I make a motion?
Well, I didn't get to talk yet.
No, I lost my opportunity.
Well, maybe.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to make a couple of comments before you go down that road. First of all, planning commissioners serve at the pleasure of the council. They don't have to do anything. We can not like their aftershave and can dismiss them. We don't have to have a reason. This isn't the only time that inappropriate stuff has happened in the town of Cave Creek. When I first got elected to council in 2005, the town had been in receipt of a letter from the risk pool, which is our insurance, that said, you guys better knock off messing with people's property rights, or we're going to cut your insurance. You're not going to have any. We won't cover your legal fees anymore. That's a danger that we face when people step out of line and don't do things right. I have been involved in the removal of 2 planning commissioners in the time that I've been on this council, and I don't regret either of them. Having said that, I'm always concerned about it's not a fine line, it's a wide chasm between activism and service. And I've got a problem with this. So go right ahead, Vice Mayor.
I don't know if you like my motion.
I won't.
My motion is that we take no action at the present time.
Second.
Or in the future, unless there is some additional problem in the future. That's my motion.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed.
Aye.
Aye or opposed, or what are we?
Opposed.
We're opposed. Okay,
If I can make a comment.
please.
I think it sends possibly the wrong message to the residents of our town. When someone, be it illegal or legally, or in this case, inappropriately does something that is held up to a higher set of standards, even on the plan commission. And I'll use the words a slap on the wrist. It just, to me, sends the wrong message that you can make a mistake, even though it appears nothing really that negative or costly will happen from this, but it could have on multiple levels. And again, I repeat myself, I just think it tends to send the wrong message that you can make a major mistake or error without any repercussion.
Mr. Mayor, the repercussion is my vote has been costed. I don't get to vote. That's the repercussion. And that's a big one.
All right, so did this council want to go, now that we've solved this issue, did this council want to go back into E-session? Or we want to wait until the Monday or Wednesday afternoon meeting to further our, can I ask that question, Bill?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I
to
don't
further our
think we have the
discussion.
time not to resolve these issues on the fire.
You want to do it? Well, we've got a
Yeah.
special meeting at 1 o'clock on Wednesday.
We should be working around the clock.
So you want to, you're saying you want to move back into
have
E-session?
meetings.
All right, in that case, the public portion of this meeting is it. Well, I can't do that either. I can't adjourn.
Mr. Mayor, You will reconvene in E-session, and then after E-session, I think you tell the public that you'll have to come back into public, but no public action will be taken. But the only action would be to.
Okay, folks, we're going back into E-session.
I don't think the results are.
It was 5-2 to not do anything. No, it was, no, it was 4-2. Sorry.
No, I said, no.
She's confused.
Oh,
I'm recusing myself from the future.
okay. So it was 5-2. Yeah. All right, we're all gonna go away. Y'all can go enjoy your evening.
Hey, Jim.
You've got a meeting at the library.
I want to welcome everybody back to the council meeting.
So I talked to him.
And I'm not even sure it's necessary that everybody sits down. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I turned off my computer.
McGuire D.
In many ways.
McGuire D. What time is it? 8:36.
We adjourned. Already adjourned? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Too late.